Came back, still didn't really know what I was going to do in May of '67, and did the obvious. I went back to work at the steel mills. This time I'm at the blast furnace, and I figure I'm going to be a metallurgical engineer and get the book. And I said, there's a problem with this. I can't spell metallurgy. So that one dropped. The supervisor said, you know what you ought to do, George? You ought to go to college. I grew up on the south side in an area called Grand Crossing. In fact, in the 60s, pretty racial time in Chicago, especially on the south side. I had the National Guard camped out at Grand Crossing Park across the street from my uncle's food store where we lived behind. And that goes on further in the story. But ended up going to high school in Mendel and Augustinian College Prep School, which it's kind of interesting because I got college prep, but I didn't know how to go to college. So I graduated in '66, not having much of an idea other than apply for some colleges. So the only ones that came to mind were the University of Chicago, IIT, and West Point. I was accepted at all of them, except West Point, except I couldn't figure out how to pay for University of Chicago or IIT because I didn't know how to apply for a scholarship or smart enough to go ask somebody how to apply for a scholarship. And West Point, I ended up running up, the alderman gets to pick 5 students. I ended up number 2 in on the selection. I lost out to the quarterback at Dunbar. But so with that shot, I did the only thing I knew how to do is go to work where my dad worked at the United States Steel Southworks in South Chicago. Went to work at the open heart furnaces. And that worked out fine until getting around to the spring of '67. I ran into a little trouble. I was on my 3rd speeding ticket, and I also had my license suspended for underage, an altered license, let's put it that way. And the Secretary of State took it away. And I figured, well, I can't work anymore. So a couple of my friends ended up going down to University of Western Illinois, which Macomb, Illinois, it was a farm kind of town. In fact, the big subject there was agricultural economics. So a few of us Chicago boys went there because it was pretty easy to deal with that kind of a curriculum. Again, not knowing too much of what to do. I was thinking of being a engineer. So I take my math class, I take my physics class. Somebody says you need 12 hours. Mary Dempsey would be proud of this. I took library science. I can contrast the Dewey Decimal System and the Library of Congress system all day long. And that went on fine. Come back home, the summer of '67 again wasn't too good of a time. Was not so good for me either. To going back to school in the fall, but now I got a little bit of a problem. Out of money. I'm facing the fact that being on the streets isn't going to be good for me. And you need 48 quarter hours to avoid the draft. And I added them up and I had 27, so I couldn't figure out how I was going to get 21 quarter hours. And I figured it didn't matter, I couldn't afford the school anyway. So I tried to get drafted because I gotta go. And November's out, December's out, and they said, man, maybe January. Well, January wasn't going to work, so by this time we're living in Roseland and go to the recruiting station. I joined the Marine Corps with my buddy Tommy, which was no problem. We're on an airplane after 3-4 days. In fact, in those days, they needed Marines so bad if you could spell your name, you got 50 points on the test. And it became an interesting experience because, all of this kind of is going to add up to attitude, luck, and breaks. So I had a bit of an attitude, but I was battalion fitness champion and got a meritorious promotion. Ended up over in Vietnam with the battalion just as they're leaving case on 68, April, end of April, somewhere around there, and managed to get through things okay. I didn't realize I was in 19 major combat operations. I had to actually look them up one day. I was on a citation somewhere, and came back, still didn't really know what I was going to do in May of 67, and did the obvious. I went back to work at the steel mills. This time I'm at the blast furnace, and I figure I'm going to be a metallurgical engineer, and get the book. And I said, you know, there's a problem with this. I can't spell metallurgy. So that one dropped. The supervisor said, you know what you ought to do, George? You ought to go to college. So I figure, yeah, not a bad idea. And if somebody tells me I could get money for the GI Bill, and I look at it as a part-time job. So I go to Luke Junior College, now Harold Washington Junior College. And I end up going to work for the state of Illinois Unemployment Bureau, which is kind of interesting because I'm taking the account clerk 2 tests. I think of it as kind of hard. I get the results back. I got a very high ranking, except it was the accountant 2 tests. One was a year experience with 2 years college. The other was 2 years of experience with a college degree. So where a break comes is I go for an interview. The state guy by the name of Carl Rappaport looks at it and says, George, you don't have a college degree. I said, well, I don't know. Introduced me to another guy, Ronnie Weller, and somehow they take pity on me and they give me a job. And you know, I proceeded to do fairly well with the state. I actually ended up being the fiscal officer for the emergency employment program. It was a break off of the WIN program under, I think, Carter, or maybe before Carter. And I go about as far as I can go with that, because now I'm at the point where I need a political sponsor to go to the next, whatever the grade is, 8, 9, whatever. And I answer an ad in the newspaper, and I end up getting a job as a building superintendent for 29 and 39 South LaSalle Street, which coincidentally was owned by the Pritzker family and the Logan family. And I'm the only guy that I took the CPA exam shortly after, because I graduated, I always forget when I graduated, 74 or something like that. By this time I'm at DePaul, graduate DePaul, I'm going to night school. Go to work for the Logans in 73. The guy that runs the family office for the Logan, Marty Fishman, starts to like me, and I start doing projects for him on the various real estate things that the Logans own, and I'm learning by doing. And out of school comes one of the Logan son-in-laws, Peter Morris, who proceeds to be driven. He wants to do everything that it's, the worst thing you could do is be the Jewish son-in-law of a deceased entrepreneur. So he had a lot of pressure from on his shoulders, in his mind anyway, to be greater than Seymour. So he gets me working part-time. They're doing 25 unit, $4 million raises for basically accountants, lawyers on Wall Street. Next thing you know, they're forming VMS Realty in June of 81. And I basically set up the program for them. We basically staged it at the time. Bob Van Kampen, who started the Unibond business, was brought in by Joel Stone, who was our accountant at the Logans, and the 3 of them ended up going and they get me to set up the company, which was pretty good because I made it up as went along, because we had 4 employees. Prudential Base came out to sponsor us, and I proceed to do a walk and tell. This is what due diligence is. This is property management. This is how we finance. This is what we do here. Here's how we do this. And Prudential Base starts to give VMS money, and everything is moving except at the point that Marty comes to me and says, you know, George, you got to make a decision. You got to go one way or the other way. You know, you're kind of half in the boat here. And I decide, well, you're probably right, Marty. It's not fair because I'm doing this part-time, but I'm being $25 an hour, so not too bad. And I proceed to end up just being on my own and then doing stuff for BMS until we bought the Boca Raton Hotel. And Morrison Stone said, you know, all our secrets, you got to come into the company. And I said, that's fine. A partner of mine, Dennis Callahan, said, we'll come in. And my whole employment contract was a one-page notebook, legal pad that basically responded to duties. And the only thing I cared about was the money and how much I was getting out of the deal. And Callahan's only difference was, and you got to watch George, because I was tending to go a little wild in those days. But we go in there, and next thing we know, we own 58 hotels, 20,000 rooms, a couple $1 billion worth of hotels, and working out great. Until Peter starts going a little flaky, he ends up divorcing his wife, Holly, and you know, we still, Dennis and I had a strong feeling for the family, and so Xerox comes in, bails out BMS. Dennis and I leave, and we proceed to go to a former company called Ruff, Callahan and Himmeter, and we start doing the development work on mega resorts to Hyatt. Basically the Maui surf into the western Maui, the western Kauai, et cetera, to Hyatt Waikoloa, which is now the Hilton Waikoloa, and doing really well until that fades out and ends up going and coming in as the EVP of Ritz-Carlton, and proceeded to do all their Asian and Eastern Europe development because the U.S. was in trouble. Until I got tired of traveling 3 weeks a month and couldn't get the Johnson, the chairman, couldn't get me to move. So finally he was even buying my house. And I said, well, I got to make a decision. So I was retiring. I had some money. I retired and I sat out a 2-year non-compete agreement, but started doing some consulting. And the next thing you know, end up forming Trinity Investment Trust in 1996 to buy a small hotel in Sedona, which coincidentally, Jennifer and her family were my investors, along with some of their other investors, including Sonnenschein. Some of the guys still sit on the board of trustees, and gave me the break to get that one going. And then I get the idea that, you know, Hawaii's going upside down. That we got to decide we're going back to Hawaii, because I'd worked out a number of Chuck Sweeney's problems there with hotels and the Japanese. We got a hold of the guy that used to be a local attorney, John Miho, and 3 of us started buying a lot of Hawaii properties. We ended up with a $1 billion or so of Hawaii properties, and go as far as open office in Japan, because the Japanese banks liked us for buying their stuff at a discount, but they could get rid of their equity by doing that. And we formed one of the first J-REITs in Japan. I think we were J-REIT number 7. Exited by this time we're into the 2000 or so. We owned a luxury hotel company, 60% to Raphael Hotel Group, which owned 5-star properties in Europe, and them, in fact, in those things, the Staines are also investors of mine in those deals. And things started going different. Sweeney wanted to develop in Mexico. Miho wanted to do everything except leave Hawaii. And I was in the process of recapitalizing a public company, small one that had 2 assets, the CR Tucson, which was drug and rehab center, which certainly was not quite, it was a little scary for me doing drinking and smoking at the same time. But it had a great concept called Marable that Bill O'Donnell came up with. It was in a lot of trouble, and ended up working the deal out. Got the one of my Hawaii investors, Apollo, to come in and recap the company, and still managed to keep 2/3 of it for Bill and them. And then comes along that Apollo reminds me, you know, George told me when the stock was $1, you know, you'd get me $5. For 3 years later, we're almost at 5. We got to go. Well, I can't go and buy out, have the public buy out Apollo. Is a smart real estate thing, because you must have sold it for too much money. I meet with the independent directors, and we basically decide to take the company private. So we take it private, and it turns out quite well. The drug and alcohol business came back big time. Steve Case ends up buying Marable. Paul Daly, happy to know that he's third or fourth owner. Hyatt now owns Marable. If only we could hold things longer. But nonetheless, the prices went up each time. And from Trinity Investment Trust, as we split, it became Trinity Hotel Investors, bought a number of hotels, 28 or so hotels across the mainland U.S., and caught the bad end of the recession in 2008. Spent a lot of time they start to go working out the deals and getting our money back and the investors' money back. And I thought I was going to retire again until somewhere 5 years ago, a defunct casino hotel comes up, Hooters Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. It looked so bad that it's the kind of deal that we're good at. That's basically dealing with turnarounds. And we get involved with that and change the story, and brought in our management company, and from $1 million EBITDA when we took over to when we sold it 5 years ago, August last year, we were up to about $13 or $15 million EBITDA. But in the meantime, while this is going on, where some of the things changed in attitude, I come back from Vietnam. I got a South Side attitude. I grew up in an area that at some point I'm the minority, because between the 76th Street, 79th Street, Dobson and Greenwood Boulevard, there's just a bunch of Italian families, and the neighborhood changed because in those days, integration in Chicago was basically white neighborhoods turning black. And as only you do when people are different, you're fighting all the time. And the same thing was happening in the 60s when communities changed and rose more. But the Marine Corps kind of gave me a different attitude on just about everything, except don't stay in the Marine Corps. But I go back and I end up in Park Forest South, which was a Newtown community, very racially integrated. Really liked it. We started our own preschool, and somewhere around 1976, even go as far as I get tapped by Paul Green, who's a legendary political writer in Chicago. He passed away in 2016. And Green decides to do a big social experiment. The township is basically covers the south of Cook County, and most of it falls within Will County. Well, it's all Will County, but part of Park Forest is in there, Park Forest South, and Moniz in there. And we had an election, and it's a Chicago-style election because all the Southsiders who moved into Park Forest South, they know how to knock on doors, and we managed to overturn in the caucus the Democrats who always ran, who would basically meet at the VFWs, choose their slate, which were the same guys, drink beer and go out and get trounced by the Republicans, because Will County is, especially the East End, is very Republican. And we won a hotly contested election. We were so well liked that Green and I were taking the Joliet on it, went through a recount for about 6-7 months, which we managed to survive enough votes, because anything you want to know about voting laws and why you make an X and why you can't make a check, it's because the old Chicago clerks used to put lead in their fingernails, and they could spoil ballots just by flicking their nails, or an X you got to lift off the paper. Anyway, that's the aside. But, you know, it started doing the social things, and then sometimes 2002, Father Dennis ends up coming around, and he proceeds, nice to meet you and stuff like that. He shows up in my office on Park Avenue with a box of cigars. And I said, wow, this is pretty nice, because anybody that gives me cigars, I'll do anything for. And he had enough information to bring along a good box of cigars. And I proceeded to become one of the founding sponsors of the Coleman Entrepreneurship Center. and later on the real estate center, and later on the School of Hospitality leadership, and end up on the board of trustees, I think in 2007, and I'm here talking to you today.